I'd like to now move on to another question from Nikki, which is about river and lake pollution. Is Nikki here? Well, you sent some great questions, so you're here in spirit, even if not in person. So the question here, what is being done locally to tackle the issue of sewage and other chemical pollutants getting into our rivers and lakes? And I think it's fair to start with Alex, because I know that you were quite involved in this. So shall we pass that down to Alex?
Well, look, it is certainly true, and let's be absolutely clear up front, that I think the behaviour of a number of the water companies has been, as I put it in Parliament, the unacceptable face of capitalism. What I mean by that is particularly creating offshore shell companies as a way of disguising how money runs through a system, runs through accounts, layers of bureaucracy which are designed to evade transparency, and so on. So I do think that there has been a significant market failure in that regard. So that is a fair point. I do believe, however, that it is important to not just say, but actually to do. And so I was very disappointed the fact that we have in Gloucestershire and in Cheltenham a combined sewage overflow. Now, what that means in plain terms, I'm sure you all know this, but basically, when you get runoff, when it rains a lot, that goes into a combined sewage overflow, which is basically a big hole in the ground, which has got a gully, a channel going through it, which carries, sorry to be a bit gross about it, but all the sewage, right? And then when all that water comes in off the hill, particularly off the scarp, that mixes in with that, it causes it to overtop, and either it would lead to homes in Charlton Kings backing up, because I say that because the CSO is just by Dunkerton's, it would lead to it backing up, or it would vent into the River Chelt. Now, I declare an interest, the River Chelt goes through my back garden, I see it every day, but that is completely wrong. Now, this is a system, by the way, which doesn't just exist in England, it exists in Denmark, in Belgium. There are signs if you walk through Belgium saying, please don't flush the loos in heavy rain because it'll end up in the canal. So this combined sewage overflow is not unique to the United Kingdom, and it's existed for decades and decades and decades. But nonetheless, it's not acceptable. And so I got Severn Trent on site and said, you're going to have to sort this out. There was a huge amount of toing and froing, and I spoke to Liv Garfield, who's the chief executive, and I said, you need to stump up. And she has put up, in fairness, about £500,000, which went into a wholly new engineering project, which is near Dunkerton's. Basically, any of you remember your maths, it's a big cylinder, pi r squared times height, huge cylinder volume of overflow. So it catches, in times of heavy rain, it creates a huge tank. The net effect has been that the number of overflows has gone down by 99%. That's the latest readings that have come out. So, of course, there are problems elsewhere in the country, but my job, and indeed the putative members of Parliament's job, is to sort stuff out in your patch. And in our patch, through a lot of hard work, we have an engineering solution, which, as far as I know, can't guarantee it, but as far as I know, is far ahead of any other constituency in the country.
Thank you. Julie. Shall I ask the question again? What's being done locally to tackle the issue?
I have no idea what's being done locally other than what Alex is telling us he's managing to get done. But I think the idea that this is market failure is an interesting concept because as I understand it, each water authority is only owned by one owner, most of whom are not UK based. They're all over the world, from what I've read. And if we take Thames Water as an example, what's happened there is that they've been allowed to borrow huge amounts of money based on the assets that they own and use that money to pay dividends to shareholders and then find that they have massive debts, particularly because of interest rates have gone up. And they're now turning to their investors, asking them for extra money, and they're saying no. And saying that you have to actually raise the money from your customers. So somehow, the people in Thames Water, and I guess it could well be happening in other water authorities, are paying twice. We paid once already, and now we're being asked to bail them out. And this is because of a lack of long-term financial planning and investment in the infrastructure.
So nationally, if Labour were to come into power, what would Labour do about water problems?
I don't know, quite honestly, but I think because I'm not they're working on a plan at the moment, but the general move within Labour is to work towards greater public ownership. So they would be looking at what they could do to sort out the ownership of the water authorities. And I think, other countries are astonished at the idea that a utility as essential as water is in foreign hands, and most of ours is. So we are looking at it. The plans from Labour are not clear yet. It's a big issue again. We are, in a number of these areas, taking on what has become a massive change in the way that things are organised. And it's not going to be easy, as Keir Starmer keeps saying. These are big issues. They're not easy ones to solve, and they're not going to be solved overnight. But the intention is there to come up with a system that gives the public much greater control, much greater security in terms of their water supply, and one, again, which respects the needs of water supply users rather than being driven mainly by the interests of shareholders.
Thank you. We'll come to that. What's been done locally to tackle the issues, and what would the Lib Dem stance be?
Julie's set me right up here to deliver the line I was going to deliver, which is we're basically in an elite club of one in terms of countries that have whole-scale privatised our water system and our sewage system. It's a total disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. And there's one thing that the people on the right of politics can't answer, is that they don't want our government to own any of our national utilities and our national infrastructure, but they're absolutely happy for companies based abroad and companies wholly owned by other governments to own our national utilities. Now, if you can answer me that question, if anyone in the room can answer me that question, and Alex possibly might be able to, then they're a better political philosopher than I am, and I don't claim to be a political philosopher. So Alex said spending about 500 grand on that bit of infrastructure in Cheltenham. The government's recent announcement was they're going to give us, as a nation, £11 million extra, so that's about 22 bits of infrastructure to account for the whole of the nation, which doesn't sound like an awful lot to me. And ultimately, we're all going to have to pay for this in our bills. When Thames Water goes bust, maybe Thames Water will end up in public hands again, or maybe some other third sector organisation will take it into its control. But we're all going to have to pay for it, and we're going to have to pay because, I don't know, when I was a child sometime, a long time ago, Margaret Thatcher and the Conservatives decided they were privatising the water industry and making us the one member of that elite club that is willing to put the one thing that keeps us all alive for sure in the hands of private interests. And it's a total disgrace. Our country should hang its head in shame because we've allowed that to happen over a long period of time, and it's completely unacceptable. Alex mentioned that the system exists in other countries and listed a couple of those countries. The system exists because it needs to exist. It is not used to the scale it is used in this country and other countries. And it's not used to the scale in those countries because they've invested in their sewers. So the sewers can cope with the amount of poo that are going into them and the amount of other sewage that's going into them as well. Our country hasn't done because private companies, which are not regulated properly by Ofwat, which is overseen by the government, have not invested in our sewers. We've all been taken for a ride. And just to finish off, Alex said that the amount of spills going to the Cheltenham's gone down. If you've gone down to St Peter's Park and smelled it, it's absolutely disgusting. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's instructive, and you see all the things that are on the grills, sanitary pads, tampons, toilet paper, all kinds of things that you don't want to see and shouldn't be in our waterways. But on the statistics, if you go on the recent stats that came out, published by the Environment Agency, spills into the Cheltenham Down as well between 2022 and 2023 went up tenfold. Now, the infrastructure is going in, and I understand that the infrastructure is going in and maybe it will go down next year. But that wasn't what we were told was going to happen, and the tenfold increase is something that we shouldn't have to put up with. I've clarified the point, Alex. We know the infrastructure is going in soon, and it might. The spills have gone.
Can we just finish?
The spills have gone up tenfold. It's publicly available data. You can all go home and look at it tonight.
If you've got something that you want to correct, and then we'll come to you, Tabi.
Just on that specific point, in January last year, there was a blockage just upstream of Dowdeswell CSO, and that led to more spills. That was before the infrastructure programme had taken place. So that huge cylinder that I talked about, that went in the summer of 2023 and was completed in January 24. It's since the installation of that engineering solution that spills have gone down 99%. So just happy to make that clear.
Thank you. Thanks, Tabi. What are your thoughts?
So this
From the Green Party perspective too.
Thank you. So actually, kind of excitingly in a way, I've started chairing overview and scrutiny at Cheltenham Borough Council since Of course, I've been chairing overview and scrutiny on Cheltenham Borough Council since last autumn. So we actually did check in with our flooding strategy in the last meeting that we recently had. So we kind of really wanted to make sure that we were checking in regarding our thoughts about the 2007 flooding, trying to mitigate against, you know, other potential extreme flooding situations like that, and also just talking about our drainage systems. So it was quite a good discussion, and I think we got a lot out of it. But it did make me very conscious of the fact that there are some significant limitations. It's been frustrating because, I mean, no, you can't argue that utility companies make a lot of money. In some ways, it's worth kind of examining, just as you know, Julie and Max have said, just the fact that, you know, if these utilities make money, then why privatise them? Because it basically means that the money that they generate is, you know, basically being used to line shareholders' pockets, and that's kind of, it's a bit frustrating and disappointing to see that, you know, like the purpose of a utility company then becomes to generate wealth for shareholders and not to invest in the Victorian drainways that we have, because they are Victorian. Like, that was pretty much the last time that the ambitious infrastructure development was actually taken on, and it's basically not been upgraded in any meaningful way. I mean, we talk about sort of green jobs and upskilling and stuff. I mean, wouldn't it be a great opportunity to, you know, be able to offer people, you know, like, you know, work in sort of like actually kind of planning these things and actually mitigating things before we reach crisis point. You know, it's good to try and deal with big problems while they're still small problems, and try and empower ourselves so we can respond over a longer period of time rather than having to freak out at the last minute and try and like get something sorted. So I think that generally it would be well worth trying to be a lot more proactive than we have been, and instead of waiting decades to take action on anything and kind of just let the market regulate and enforce itself, it's just good to have these kinds of checks and balances of power, and just having that kind of again, that sort of oversight and scrutiny that I am quite a big fan of, is just making sure that that's a meaningful engagement, that you're asking the right questions and empowering people who just want to act in the role of a critical friend. I think that that's most constructive, really.
Thank you, Tabi. Ian, what do some of your business clients think about what's going on related to water and sewage, and is it impacting their ability to do business? I should say
I'll
that.
be perfectly honest.
Is it impacting their ability to do business?
Yeah.
No.
It's not a conversation I have every day,
No,
to be honest,
exactly.
because
I don't think people got the joke, but I did.
Yeah. Sorry. I can't really speak to this in terms of what's being done in any meaningful way. I can only speak as a resident of Cheltenham and as a private citizen. And, you know, as a businessman, I'm obviously full square behind the idea of the market economy, and shareholders are allowed to make money out of their business, but I tend to be agreeing with most of the panellists that some things are better off owned by the public, and water is one of them.
Thank you. Thank you very much.